Alrighty. Hello, folks. Welcome back to How to CAD Almost Anything MIT Summer 2026 edition. Today, believe it or not, we are in session 8. This is our last session. We've gone through 8 weeks of CAD 7, and this is our 8th one right now. And while I'm very sad that this journey is over, I think I've saved the best part for today. Let's get started. So as always, because we are asynchronous right now, I don't get to ask if you have any questions. We'll save those for when we are in person. Instead, I'll jump straight into today's topics, which include CADing, a vertical piano, and a euphonium. Now, specifically, what else is there left to be learned in our CAD journey? Because we've done a lot so far. I wanted to put together some slides right now to show you all of the different projects that we've done. And honestly, when I was building this deck, I realized that maybe this edition of How to CAD Almost Anything may have been my favorite one. This is, I believe, my 7th time teaching this class. And honestly, because of the variety of projects that we've done, I think I had a lot of fun. And it was very pedagogical in terms of being able to illustrate how different CAD commands can be used to arrive to your desired result. As you can see here, a lot of variety. We started in session 1 by CADing these free instruments in here, relatively simple, getting familiar with the different commands that are available to us, our usual extrusions, perhaps how to color all of these different parts. Then we started to complicate things a little bit more when we went into session 2, where we started to bring pictures into our environment, and we designed these three instruments: the guitar, the marine horn, and the ukulele. I think that was a very powerful session because you start to realize how reverse engineering comes into play. You have all of these commands available for you to use, and then by simply bringing a picture, you can start building things as if they were layers of a cake. And that's what we've done there. And slowly introducing the sweep command, even though that came later on in terms of how to use the strings. Session 3 was really a review of 1 and 2. And what we've done is really putting all of those things together to make slightly more complex objects, like the ones you can see here. Finally, on session 4, we were back into learning new things, and here we started to look a lot into symmetry. That's why we start to see the plane creation, start to use the revolves, the patterns, and you can see how you have it with the maracas, here with the banjo, and with the bongos as well. Now, we are in the second half of our class, and now in session 5, we started to do a little bit more interesting things, specifically by finally introducing sweep, and then also using blend/loft. And that's how we were able to do the trombone in here, the natural horn. That was a lot of fun. I think it's really a matter of how good of a sketch you do. And then on session 6, we were doing a review of 4 and 5, and we were able to put together here the harp and also the accordion, which was very interesting because of the way that you have that part that bends in here. That was a very interesting effect, which is not very difficult to achieve given the stuff that we would learn previously. Finally, just recently in session 7, we started to learn how to use assemblies, because all of these parts, all of these instruments really, they are in reality assemblies of different parts. But sometimes it's easier to CAD as a single object, a single part, as opposed to all different ones. And we've really exploited to the maximum this technique of the master sketch, where you have a single sketch and you're kind of referencing every subsequent part that you'll be doing with regards to the master sketch. And that was why really CADing the overall general frame was not very difficult. And also in session 7, we learned how to do drawings and a little animations on how things can explode and come together. Session 8, conveniently, has been left in blank, because that's what we're going to be doing today. For our very last session, I saved today 2 very special projects. We're going to start with the vertical piano, which is the one that you see in the left, and then we're going to wrap up things with the euphonium. I believe looking at these two, the piano will hopefully be easier to do, even though we're not going to go into the details of CADing each one of the strings. We're going to get the overall shape. And the same thing with the euphonium. And the reason for that, we're going to cut them as parts, is because what I saved for session 8, our very last session of our CAD journey with Creo, is something extremely powerful, which is how to use equations, how to create parameters, and really how to create a family of different configurations of the same part. What do I mean by that? if you look at all of the instruments that we have in here, some of the magical stuff about them is that, yes, these are some representative examples of these instruments, but there's so many different variations of these ones that may exist. You can have 20 different guitars. You might have 20 different ukuleles. How would they differ? Well, the colors might change. Maybe the length of them, perhaps it's like slightly longer, slightly wider. Maybe you might have more keys. You might have less keys. And I think that's precisely what we're going to see with these two today. We're going to learn how to create equations, or really how to create parameters, for example, height and width. Then we're going to explain how we can bring those into our CAD environment and start to use them in our specific dimensions. For instance, I can say when I draw a rectangle to have the overall shape of the piano, I can establish that to always be equal to the height and always be equal to a width that I have established beforehand, and that will have full controlling power over our CAD design. And then we can do things like saying, oh, what if I wanted more keys, less keys? What if I wanted this piano, well, obviously to be taller and to be wider? What if I wanted to suppress certain features? As an example, if I did a fillet in there, what if I don't want that fillet? And there's reasons why you may want to do that. And the same thing with the euphonium. What if I wanted that neck in here to be taller? Or what if I wanted more keys, even though that might be a little bit difficult with the euphonium in here? So that's what we're going to learn today. I think we've learned a lot in the last 7 sessions. In really, I think we've gotten pretty knowledgeable in how to use Creo and essentially be able to have a decent set, a decent portfolio of tools that you can use to CAD almost anything. Now, the key in here is how can you CAD almost anything in a very smart way, where you can just stick to a single object and use that one and fully reference it in the future using all of these different equations, parameters to create configurations. And that hopefully will be something very powerful that you'll be able to use way into the future. So that being said, let's jump straight into Creo and let's start CADing. Alrighty, so now we are in Creo, which means we can get started. So I'll begin by doing a demo of the commands I will be doing today, how to create these parameters and hopefully a family table to create different configurations of the object I will be doing. And then I'll jump into doing the piano and the euphonium, our two instruments, our last two instruments for session 8. And to motivate what we'll be doing, I have here prepared a quick picture. We're going to start by making a very simple model of a stool, a piano stool. I guess it makes sense, right? Because we'll be cutting later a piano. This is a very easy. I think hopefully with the things that we've learned so far, you can look at this picture and say, yes, I can cut this. This shouldn't be too difficult to do. We can start, for instance, by doing, I think, well, my approach, right, even though there won't be a ton of approaches, would be to draw a cylinder, very easy, and then we can draw one of these little legs. Then we can do a quick revolve. Well, not a quick revolve, we can do a quick circular pattern by 3, since it has 3 little legs. And then we can draw a little extension from here, from which we will have the actual seat. Something very simple, not too difficult. And then we can add a few fillets and we can take it from there. So let's design that. So I'm gonna go here. I go here to new. I call this, I call it, I won't call it an address example for now, but I don't think I'll save it later. So I'll go here, okay. So now let's go here to sketch, actually not even. Let's go here to file, prepare model properties. And as always, this is very important. I hope you will remember by now. We'll set to our desired units. But this always causes some trouble, so better to stick to what we know we like. And now we'll go here to sketch. Let's select that plane. And let's start exactly by doing that procedure that I was highlighting before. We'll go here to circle. And a priori, I will give these things some values, but just bear in mind, we're going to change them. So just CAD it as if you would always CAD any other object. So let's start by giving that 100. Then let's make that 200. Yeah, something like that. Then I'm going to do a sketch on it doesn't matter, one of these planes. And what I'm going to do is a little construction line, really to determine where this tool is going to end. So yes, I can say that I want that to be let's say 400. And we can always go back to our picture to see whether we like what we're drawing or not. We can look at that. Yeah, we can say 200. And let's see whether I can draw another line that will go from here to, well, I could do a quick projection of that. And yes, I'll make that a construction. Then I go here to arch. And we'll draw something like that. Very easy, not complicated. And we'll draw a little leg. Let's make that 100. And then maybe we can come here. Yeah, something like that. Let's make that 100, so like about half of the height of this. And then we can do, you see how it has like a little effect in there. That's roughly over here. So I'm gonna come like that. I'll make that a quick construction. So you see, really, this is the easy part. We're just drawing something very simple. This is session 3, maybe, or like, actually it would be session 4, because that's when we learn how to make patterns. So let's make that 150, and then we can come with the arch. I'll do a quick arch like that, and then I will do another one that will come maybe like this. And this is when I realize that that number should be maybe, or should be maybe less. And then we come back here. There we go. Something very easy, like what we see here. Might not be the most beautiful stool, but it will do the trick. So I go here to OK, then I go to extrude, and then we can say that we want this to be symmetric, and we can make that 20. We can leave that just like that. I go here to OK. Then I'm gonna hide some of these planes because I don't need them. And then I'll come over to select that feature in here. Then we'll do, actually, before we can even do a pattern, I need to go back in time and I need to create an axis here. So I'll create an axis there just to have it perfectly. And now, yes, I'm gonna go here to this feature, pattern. Then we're gonna go here to axis. I'll select that one. We'll do angular extent and let's do free. Okay, so now pretty simple. We have those 3 legs. And now let's finish this by drawing 2 little circles. So we'll do one that will be like the neck of this thing. So as you can see, not many details yet. Will come with the fillets soon, but nothing too fancy. I'll go here to OK. And now let's do another sketch on that face. And let's draw a bigger circle like that. Good. And let's make that one 500. I'll go here to again. Go here to, and I'll say that is 50. Great. Our stool, let's beautify it like we've learned. So this is a bit of review, as you can see. We can go here to round and say, well, I want that to be 15. I want that to be 15 as well. And then let's do another one here. This is, by the way, where it matters to make individual fillets, individual rounds, as opposed to, you see how I can always add them as new sets, which is something that I really like about Creo. But for the purposes of what's going to come up in a minute, I think it will be better to always do it as individual features, like I'm doing it right now. In the sense that, not individual as in like making each one of these lines as a different one, more like, all right, this fillet that I'm doing right now represents the one that goes here on the leg. The one that I did earlier represents the one that goes up top. That's an example. So suppose you have all of these. I'm gonna go to OK. And let's do a third one that's gonna come here. Let's go here too. OK. Good. Yeah, so like a very, very simple tool. One of the first things that we're gonna learn today is how to change the names of certain dimensions. That's something that we hadn't looked at yet. So it's a good point to illustrate what that is right now. If you go here to extrude one and you go to where it says DL, as an example, you can see all of the different dimensions per se that are associated with extrude one. So let me show you again. Extrude one, DL, these are all of the different dimensions. If I click in that 200, I can, instead of calling that D1, which is going to be really for future reference, what the dimension will be called, I can call this one cylinder height. And now if I go back to extrude one and we go to, and I go, sorry, extrude one, now DL, and you go to that 200, I double click, you see that that is the name that appears there. Important to have in mind. So I can go to that one. I'm gonna call it cylinder. I'm gonna call it diameter. Yeah. Now we go to our pattern. You go back to the exact same thing. You see, you have this one, the free extrudes. I believe that's the one because there's a little bit of trial and error, right? The names sometimes are not too explicit. This, because of the number that it has, which is free, I believe that's the number of patterns that we're doing. So I'm gonna call this N patterns. Good. So now if I go back to that, DL, free extrudes, that is N patterns. Good. An important thing to have in mind. And important thing to also remember what you're naming each one of these things. But at the same time, if I go back to, say here, and I go to extrude 2, and I go to DL, well, you can see also what are the different numbers that you've put in here. For instance, that 400, I can call it leg height. And that 200, I can call it I don't know, leg inner dia. I think this is good for now. Actually, one more that I want to do, which is in extrude 4. If I go over to here to DL, that 500, I'm going to call it C. Oh, no, actually, that is not what I wanted to do. But it will coming later. I'm going to call this sit. Yeah, good. Excellent. So now we have all of our names written down, and this will be very handy because now we can start to do some magic. I'm going to go to tools, and there's this area in here, which is where I'm going to focus right now. If you look at a tool like this one, you already kind of know the answer to my question because these are the ones that I've changed the names of. But what are the different things that I could configure, that I could make different out of this little tool? Well, I can change the number of different legs that it has. I can change maybe the overall inner diameter that you have in there, their height. I can change also the overall width of that seat. So let's go ahead and try some of these things. So if I go over to parameters in here, I can change, I can create specific parameters like saying, all right, I want the height to always be equal to, let's call it height param as an example, right? I want height param to be equal to, I think it's 400, let's do 450 as an example. And I go to, okay, great. So that's an important parameter that I have in here. So now if I go to relations, and then I go over to, back to, I believe here, this is like to give us an idea of what we call everything. So that's leg inner dia, that's leg height. So I'm gonna write here that leg height is gonna be equal to, now if you don't remember what you're calling different things, you can go to where it says local parameters, and I'm gonna add that little guy in here. I'm gonna move it for a second. So that is height param. Just this is the first relation that we're gonna add. So this thing here, leg height, which is what we call that dimension, we're gonna make it equal to a parameter that we just created, which is height param. Okay, so to make sure that what the equation per se that you've written makes sense, you'll go to where it says here execute, relations have been verified. Then you click on OK. Now, yes, that is the 400 appears, even though we said 450. So you need to go to where it says model. And now there's this button that we've used before when we were creating the assemblies and we would change things. It's called regenerate. So click on regenerate and voila, this has changed. So now that is longer. Now, if I go back to, let's go to tools. Let's go to parameters. Let's change that to 500. I click on OK, nothing happens yet. But if I go to model and I click on regenerate, you see that voila, this changes in here. So yes, that is one way you can create. If you go back to tools, parameters, I can create another one. I can call the next one, let's call it number n param. Just make sure that you're not calling the dimensions that you defined before the same things as your parameters. That's what I'm struggling with right now to come up with different names. But I'm gonna call, let's make that one 5. Oh no, 56, that will be too much. Let's call that 5. So now if we go back to relations, and I'm gonna now go to the next line in here. What I can do is go back to this guy, and now if I click there, it automatically appears. So we have different things. So now the great thing about having renamed things before is that it's easier to identify. So if I go to n patterns, when I just write it down there, patterns is equal to, and we can see here, these are the parameters that we have. I'm gonna call this n param. And then one fun one in here, I believe it's D20. D20, if I'm not mistaken, is the angular extent. So I might add here D20, I would have to check it, right? But I'm gonna put 300. We'll see what happens. I do not know. But I'm gonna go here to execute. Everything has been successfully verified. I go here to OK. Yes, I believe that was the angular extent. So if I go back to model and I click on regenerate, I mean, it seems still pretty symmetric. So if I go back here to DL, what is that one? Yeah, D20, let's call it. The problem about this angular one is that I believe that because of the settings of our pattern, if you go here to edit definition, I may not be able to edit it because I already have it like that, but we'll see. I'm gonna go here to OK. Now let's see over. I'm gonna go to view, go to tools, then relations in here. I'm not gonna call that D20, let's call that one angular. Excellent. Let me just make sure. And you see how it appears there. I think it believes that I created a parameter, which is why it's appearing down there. But if I go over here, let me just go to DL, not, sorry. Let's see. Go here to OK. Now to model regenerate. But nothing happens. Maybe. Well, actually, yes, kind of. Like it does recognize that that's 300. So I think it's actually working. Maybe it's tough to like realize it with what we have in here. But it's doing something. So all right. So we have that one in there. What else can we check? Oh, something very interesting too is that maybe I forgot to do that earlier, or maybe it's not appearing here. Is that the fillets that I had before, they're not being patterned because I created them like these guys in here, they were their own thing. If I go here to round 2, let me edit this thing. And let me select. I'm gonna delete. I'm gonna delete. Delete. So I'm gonna just leave the first 4. I'm gonna delete all of those guys. I go do OK. And now I go into round 2. And I do a pattern, and our reference is the previous pattern. You see that now it appears on all 5 of them. So then if we go over to tools, then relations, And in here, let me see, you can also change it from here. Let's make that 8 now. And now we go to model and we click on regenerate. It looks like a mess, but now all of the fillets are appearing in each one of these legs. So this is pretty neat, as you can see here. So we've changed the height, we've changed the number of legs. What about the diameter here? Well, I can go over to view, again to tools, and just go here to relations. Let me, I believe this one is not working, so I'll just delete it. Maybe we should have created the circular pattern a different way already without the angular extent, and we could change that one there. But instead, I'm gonna go now to this guy here. So that's sit dia, dia, and we're gonna make that, I believe, height param. Yeah, that's a number. Let's see whether I can just impose it there. I go here to OK. And now I'll go over to model, regenerate, and voila, it's changing too. So this is a pretty quick way of changing things. So all we have is a singular part. We've designed this tool, a very basic version of it. And just by being creative about the dimensions that we have, we were able to create already a completely different one instead of having to start from scratch and having to create a new part from there. Now, one thing, one note of caution that I'll say before we proceed into making something a lot more advanced like a piano is that this is why it's so important to always fully dimension things, to add as many dimensions as you can, because in the process of regenerating, as I'm clicking in here, your part, some of these features might be broken, which may or may not happen in the future, depending on how careful we are. But now that we've done this, let's do one last thing, which is what if I wanted to have in the same part all of these different variations of this tool. So now if we go back to tools, so we've gone to parameters, we've gone to relations. If we go to relations, we can change these things. Yes, but now I'll go to family table. This is perhaps the most powerful feature, the most powerful tool you'll find here in Creo. I'll go here and we can say this doesn't, maybe I'll call it. No, actually, the example is our tool. I'm just confused. I thought I could change the name. But in here, we're going to create a table that is like an Excel, where we're going to list out the different features or the ones that we care about from this part, and we can change them, perhaps according to whether we want those to stay or not. So the first thing that I'll do is here, I mean, here you can see the instructions, but I can tell you here, like, you have to create columns. Columns represent the dimensions or features that you're interested on. Meanwhile, the rows represent the different variations, the different models, the different configurations of the same part. So I'll click here on that button, and it's gonna prompt me with this table right here to start selecting the things that I'm interested on. So for instance, if you go to parameters, I can say, well, I want that one and that one. So I click that one, control the other one, and I go to insert selected, and then I go to close. See that now those two appear. That's great. Then what else can we do? Well, if I go over to dimension, and then we go over to this one, you see that now dimension, now I'm gonna start selecting dimensions that I'm interested on. So what are some of the ones that I want? Well, that 500 here, leg height, that's what we called it. Well, maybe that was, I'm gonna bring this one too. I'll bring that 200, the leg inner dia, which we didn't name before. And then if we go over to extrude 4, so I just like clicking in here, that's how they all appear. I'll go to that 300 and we have the sit dia. I think this is fine, even though one last thing that I think is interesting is, let's start with this. I'm gonna go here to, okay, great. So now you see that I have a little table where, yes, you have, I wanna call this one, well, I'll start in a second, but this row represents our default, which is what you can see here. Now, I'm gonna start creating rows. And now, yes, I believe I should be there. So I cannot rename the first one, but I can rename the next one. So I'm gonna call this one B2, and I'm gonna call this one B3. So what are some things that we can change? Well, the height parameter, let's make this 400. Let's make that 300. Let's make that 5. Let's make that 3. Leg height, yes. So really leg height depends on this one. So let me see whether I'm gonna delete that column because I do not really need this one. But let's make this 100 and let's make this 300. I'm not sure whether it's gonna regenerate properly or not, but we shall see. And then for the seat diameter, let's do 400. Let's do 500 again. So let's go here to, okay. So now if I go back to family table, you see that all of these guys appear. So then if I go to B2 and I open it, it's creating our new part. And this is what you can see here. This is literally what we had from before. So this is, I wouldn't work from B2, reading B2 is not an independent part per se. B2 lives within the example part. The example is how it's called. So I wouldn't edit anything from here. I would edit things on the other one just in case. And I would, change things as needed. We go back to family table. I go to B3. I go to open. Boy, this is an interesting one. And I think I start to see where the 300 might come into play, given the way that these little pegs may have generated themselves. I think it did 1, 2, 3, and that's how it appears. So that's why it's not quite symmetric per se. It's only doing a pattern over 300. Okay, I think now I understand what was going on. So this makes sense. Let me go back to close. What else can we do here? Well, let me go over to, again, to our table. And if you don't like how things are looking like, you can change them in here. So I can say, I want that to be 4. And now let's go back to family table. Let's open this. And it's regenerating it on the spot. And you can see it here. Perfect. Maybe I'm gonna check one second here whether, yes, that's why it's not generating properly. If I did 360, now, yes, it's regenerated a lot of things. Now you see all of these pegs appearing properly. Let me just close this. Interesting. Let me just edit definition. Let me do reference that. Let me go to OK. Let me go here to model. Let me regenerate for a second. Well, maybe I shouldn't have edited. You see, this is what I would call, I'm going to blame myself for editing things in the children, like in the sub parts that we had in there. Like, I'm not going to spend time fixing this right now. But it's okay. It doesn't matter. Because one last thing that I'm going to show is the following thing. Let's go back to tools, family table, and suppose you wanted to suppress certain features that you have here. For instance, so you have a big assembly and you don't want that assembly to have so many different parts in it. So what if you wanted to suppress some of these ones? So what I'll do is I'm gonna add another column. Adding columns, again, is the equivalent of adding variables that you want to change. And then if you go to feature, I'm gonna go here to select and I'll say, you know what, I'm gonna get rid of you, pattern number 2. And then I go here to OK. And now what you see is that now Y means yes, it's currently being shown. And the dot is, like, I believe what it's saying is that it's just copying the previous thing. But I can go here to N, and I can go here to N. In fact, yes, I cannot really suppress it there. So, but I could have created an identical version to example where I do suppress it. So let's go here to OK. And now family table, and let's open B2. So let me go here to open. I cannot see it. That pattern is no longer there. So let me go back here. Let me go back to family table. Let's open B3. Same story here. Perfectly. Excellent. So it's a fun one. Like, I guess one of the last ones that you could add. So you can always add by adding columns. You can either add variables by adding columns. You can always add configurations by adding rows. And as we saw before, I can delete entire row or I can delete certain columns. Really, it is what it is. Like, depends on what you're doing. One last thing I'll do is let me save this, even though, yes, let's go here to, okay, yes, I know that I made a mistake. You don't have to tell me, Creo. But I think the real power of this comes if you bring these guys into assemblies. Because if now I go to file, I go to new, and I create a new assembly, and I go to OK, what I can do is go here to assemble, and let's go here to our example case as an example. And now, as an example, right? No pun intended, it will ask us to choose what we want. Either, I believe this is how it refers to it, the generic or B2 or B3. So let's bring the generic as it's calling it. And I'm gonna go to, okay, good. So now we have this guy here. Now let's go over to assemble. I'm gonna click back in this guy. And let's bring B2. Let me go here to, okay. Let's go here to assemble. I'm gonna bring this guy again. Let's do B3. You go to okay. So the real magic of this thing is that, again, we've only designed one part, but that part, because of the parameters and the configurations that it contains, it's equivalent to having as many parts as you want. And then at the time of bringing it to the assembly, you can change it and you can bring, well, no, you can choose which one of these different ones you actually want to bring. And then, as always, view, modify the appearances as needed for each one of these separately. So a pretty powerful thing. And I think that's why I kind of saved it towards the very end of our session 8, of our CAD journey for Creo. But we've learned a lot of different tools in terms of how to model parts. Now we can do smart modeling and save ourselves a lot of time in the future. So with this being said, now I'm going to start doing the piano. Alrighty, so now we're going to continue with our first project of today, which involves the piano. Hopefully, it won't take us so much time, but you never know. It could also, it could be very extensive. To make the piano, our general strategy will be to really start by drawing the general shape of this. So here's a picture. This one in particular, it's a nice vertical piano model that I found online. I forget I believe it's P22 if you are interested and you're in the market to get a new piano. I will start by drawing something like this, and we are gonna introduce dimensions as we go. Well, we're gonna introduce parameters as well. For instance, the height as an example, or this length in here. Then, depending on the complexity and how many different features we have, and so on and so forth, I may add a few more other parameters that we can use to create several configurations of this thing. The one that we'll for sure have is one where we have this length in here and this one right there. We can also do the length in this direction, but the one question that we need to figure out is whether we want to have, for instance, the full set of keys or not. In a moment, you will probably see me in just a second counting the number of keys. So maybe what I'm actually thinking in here is to start drawing like a version of this piano that has, let's see if I have like a picture. I can look at this from the top. I do not really know a priori right now. I'll have to look it up in a second. How many times this patterns itself? I believe it's 4 times. I'm going to draw a version of this piano that maybe has like 2, 3, 4, and 5 as an example. So what we can do is draw like only the 7 keys and then do linear patterns of that. And then the overall length of this piano will be a function of those 7 in there. So maybe I can say I can fix those 7 to be like a fixed amount of length, and then overall we're gonna do everything else with respect to those ones. So maybe the parts that will certainly be fixed for this piano is this portion in here, that portion in there will always be the same. And then we can always say that I want 1, 2 keys and another key in there. I think I can see, so we have 1 pattern, 2 patterns, 3 patterns, 4 patterns, 5, 6, 7. Let me count it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it patterns 7 times. I think we can do that. It shouldn't be too difficult. And we know from the accordion, how to design these keys. And yes, we have another picture in here we wanted to. So we have an extra key there and an extra 2 on that end. So that would be something to have in mind. In fact, maybe I will start by drawing this part of the piano and then I'll go into everything else. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll come back to you, so I'll speed cut this process because it will be kind of tough to explain what I'm doing while I'm doing it because this is going to be very experimental. But I'll certainly come back to you when once I've cut an initial model of this piano, I have the parameters already introduced in here, and then we can try to see whether we can build a family table out of that. So let's go ahead and do that. Alrighty, folks. So this is the completed piano. You can look at it here. I think it contains most of the features that we want. Obviously, I made a choice to not fillet certain parts because I personally like it more like this with sharp edges, to be honest. But otherwise, in some other places, for instance, these little pegs here in the bottom, there I think it makes more sense to fillet stuff. You're noticing right here that I'm not coloring anything yet because I kind of do not want to do that. I might leave the colors for later. In fact, maybe that might be for the very last one if I take a screenshot of this later. For now, I'm gonna leave it gray because I have a feeling that when I do create the configuration tables and I start to make all of these different variations of the piano, the colors are not gonna be retained in the model. Maybe in the generic version per se, they might, but not in the other ones. So we have this. I'm gonna save this. I'm gonna go over to tools, and you probably already saw me introducing some of these through the speed cutting process, but let me show you what I've done. So I have the following parameters. The most important one is this one, which is the key patterns. So essentially, the very first thing that I've done from the piano was doing the keys. Honestly, everything else was built around that because the building the box and everything around it, it's super simple comparatively. So I made that and I made sure that in the process of building those keys, that if I were to change that number to 7, as an example, let me go here to OK. So now you look at the piano like this. Then I go over to model and I click on regenerate. It's gonna do, hopefully it's magic. And you see, well, I'll have to come back in a second to see why that's broken. I think I know what's the issue with that, so I'll do that in a second. But with the exception of that, everything else seems to be fine. The reason why that broke actually is because of a mirror. In fact, I can go here to that original extrude that I'm gonna edit that sketch. And the problem is this one line over here. If I make, let's see whether it would work. If I choose that point, and let me choose that point and that point, or actually, I think I know what I have to do. Let me do a projection of that line. I think, yes. Go here to OK. I'm going to make that a construction. And if I go here to that point and that point, and I make them coincident, wait, did that work? Do. Wait. I think I'll create a series of lines. So I go here back to where it says, let me project here that one as well. Yes, there is a construction line, and I'm gonna draw a construction line that will go from this point over to there, then over here. And I think what we could do is make these two equal. And now that appears properly there. So let me go here to OK. Yeah, so it regenerates, so that's good. But to really, let me save this for a second. To really see whether that will stand the test of time, I'm gonna go over to tools, back to parameters. And let's say that one I make it a 5 instead. So this will now become a much shorter piano, or a slightly shorter one. I'll go here, it will regenerate, and voila. I kind of like it because this is like a baby piano when you think about it. What is the 5? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I made sure that with some clever math that I could always have those keys. You can take a look at the video to see that. But that's one of the parameters that I changed. So we have this little version of a piano. And now what we can do is go here to tools, back to parameters, and then there's another one, which is the overall height of this, which I said was 400. So I can make that, if you want, 450. And then the height in here, which is 250, that I might leave it the same. And then the box, which is 100, I can make that 120. Let me go here to OK. And now take a look. If I go back to model, I click on regenerate, you see that now everything accordingly changes. So this is like a funny looking piano. I like it. And unfortunately, things are not breaking, which means that the model will survive. So now what I'm gonna do is go here to tools, back to relations, and I'm gonna now leave everything in the version of this that I think is the one that I'm gonna call the generic one, the one that we're not gonna touch anymore. So go back to 7, model, regenerate. So this is gonna be like the standard piano per se. But now we can create the table. I think we are ready. So let me go here to save. So then we'll go over to tools, now to family table. And what are the parameters that we want to bring? Well, I'll go here to parameter, and we're going to bring 1, 2, 3, and 4. Insert selected. I'll go here to close. We'll go here to OK. That's all we want. So now this is what we got. So that's our generic case. So now let's start adding rows. What do we want to do here? So for instance, oh, and I can actually even make a version with or without the pedals as an example, right? But let's make one that is 6, but all the same stuff. Now let's add one that is gonna be 7, but let's change that to 350. Let's make that 200 for you guys to see what will happen, and let's make that 50. So I'm gonna call this one B2. I'm gonna call that B3. So let's open B2. Let's see what would that look like. Oh, interesting. So I think in the process, you see here it broke. So this is an example of what will happen. So what did I change on? Let me close B2. Let me go back to family table. I guess in the process of changing some of these heights, I did break some stuff. So maybe I'm gonna only change, I'm gonna leave that like that. Let's see. I'm gonna click on OK. Let me see what will happen if I open it now. Still the same issue. Let me see. I'm gonna. It's funny because when I was testing this earlier, this was not being a problem. Maybe because of that. Let me see. I'm gonna try that. Let's see. Okay, so I believe the problem was that part of the box. If I made it 50, that's when they were travel. So now you can see how it generates quite nicely, and you have a shorter piano. So you leave that at 250, it's just that now the height in here is much shorter. So this you could think of it as almost like an electric piano. But now let me close this one. If we go over to family table, we have this one. Let's say now, yes, let me change that to 200 and this to 300. So let's open this one. Let's see whether it's broken or not. Interesting. Okay, so it works. It's a shorter piano. It's kind of difficult to tell. And let's see whether it's indeed 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so it is a smaller piano. Oh, this is so cute. I kind of like it a lot. Let me just close this one in here. But yes, so this is it. So what I'm gonna spend some time doing right now is I'm gonna color this stuff, and then we're gonna try to see whether when we do create the configurations, whether the colors are preserved or not. So let's give it a shot. Alrighty, so moment of truth. Let's see whether this might work. So let me save here. So we go back to tools, family table, and now I open B2. Okay, so B2 still preserves the same color. So I guess this might work. The question is now, let's see, what about, let's go back here. Let's try B3. Let's go here to open as well. Not a problem. I like it. This one is like slightly shorter. It's kind of a funny one. I guess this is it. Like these are the pianos. I think they look pretty nice overall. Um, this is, you have to be very careful when you're designing these ones just to make sure that things are all fully defined whenever they have to be defined. But otherwise, if you do a delicate job, you might end up with something that looks as beautiful as this. Honestly, I'm very, very satisfied with the overall result of this design. I hope you enjoyed this part of the video, and we're going to continue in just a moment with the euphonium, the grand finale. Alrighty, so now we're back in Creo and we are ready to start our very last project, not only of session 8, but also of our summer edition of how to CAD almost anything. This one is a very fun one, and to give you a hint of what we'll be doing, you can just look at the instrument that I have right behind me, which is a euphonium. I have also here a couple of pictures. We'll be doing this instrument. With the piano, this is also another instrument that I know how to play, so it's one that I'm very familiar with. And I think that it's an opportunity to not only being able to practice the things that we've learned today, parameters and how to create relations and different family table configurations, but also really, if you look at the geometry of this instrument, I think there will be a variety of things that we can put into practice, such as creating patterns, using the sweep, using the blend command, just being creative with how we create different planes, so on and so forth. Now, what is going to be interesting about today, it's something that I've never done in how to cut almost anything, is that generally I've looked at pictures, just as like this one that you have in here. However, for the first time, I have, maybe you can see it with me, I have the instrument right here with me. I brought it here to where I work with my computer here on Creo. So what I'll be doing this time is that I'll be doing the CAD model of this instrument by looking at the one example that I have here. In fact, I'm gonna place it in my lap. That way it's gonna be easier to take a look at. So I'll be making a model. I'll start by, actually, if you look at the picture here in the screen, I'll start by doing those valves. Then I'll probably do the piping that you can see here in the front, and we'll take it from there. I'll probably speed cut this process, but to give an idea of the one parameter that I'm gonna control is gonna be the overall neck. I believe I've seen it. I have to have found some pictures, but you can see it here for the baritone, is that the overall height can change. So we're gonna create an equation or really a relation that allows us to modify that appropriately. I'll tell you, hopefully, once you get to the moment of creating the family tables, I'll stop, I'll pause the speed cutting process, and we'll be able to do that together. But in the meantime, I'm gonna start drawing this. I'll do a general sketch, and then we'll take it from there. Enjoy. Alrighty, folks, this is the completed euphonium. I think it looks honestly quite nice with all of the different valves in here. Obviously, as you can see, this is a matter of patience in terms of the result that you'll be arriving at the very end. Really depends on how much time you're willing to put into this design. I mean, here, I think doing the natural horn a couple of sessions ago definitely helped in terms of acquiring the necessary techniques to be able to CAD this thing. As you can see, like all of the pipes have a bit of a twist in there, but that's not too complicated to do. It's a matter of creating a lot of planes. So definitely feel free to stop the speed cutting process and see how I've done some of those parts. But what matters to us right now is that this is our instrument. And at one point, when I was creating the neck, this is not quite the neck, but here is like the main area from where the sound would be coming out. I created a parameter that's called height, which I set it to 450, which is currently the height of this thing. Now, if we go to revolve number 6, and in fact we look at sketch 90, there is a line in here, which I need to look at in just a moment. That's the dimension that controls how long this is. So first things first, I'm just gonna save this before everything crashes. But technically, we can create a relation. And this is gonna be as follows. We need to look at here, and the one that we're interested in particular is 2D586. So let's do D586 is gonna be equal to, let's look at parameters, height. Okay, we made, let me go here in model, let me click on regenerate, nothing happens because it was already 450. Now, I think we should be ready to power this thing. So I will go over to tools, to family tables, and I'm gonna start creating a column. And I go here to parameters, and the one that I'm interested on is height, insert selected, I'll go to okay, then okay. So honestly, our default one is gonna be 450, but I'm gonna start creating a couple of, actually, let me delete. I'm just gonna create 3 configurations of this one. For instance, one where it's 500 and one where it's 600. I click on OK. Moment of truth. Family table, I'm gonna click on the 500 one. Let's see here. I'm gonna open it. Let's see whether it generates. It's gonna take a minute because of all of the sweeps, because of the very first circular pattern, but actually seems it worked. Very good. So that's like a slightly longer neck. What about, let's go here to the original euphonium family table. Actually, let me call this one B2. And let's call this B3. Let's open B3 now. That way it's more noticeable, right? The length of this column, of the height of that bell. So let's see, it's generating everything and boom. Actually, it is working and it looks kind of nice because from my research of looking at, something failed. Let's see. Sketch 115. What are you? Sketch 115 in particular? Oh, I see. That is, I know the one that it's talking about. Close, that's okay. Right, it doesn't even know. Let me delete references. Or it doesn't even, I cannot. Let's see whether I can do that instead. What I think it's happening in this particular configuration is that if we look at that neck, I'm gonna go back to my original euphonium, which hopefully should be fine. The neck in here, this is a particular height, so it works because this is closer to here. But in this model, in B3, the neck is just a little bit longer. So this is honestly just like a little detail that you would have to be aware of, but nothing too complicated that you'll be able to fix. The most important thing in here is that it's such a complex model that creating different configurations of this without it breaking can be a little bit complicated, to be fair. But otherwise, I think it was from not just from the family tables perspective, but also from the pedagogical and being able to bring all the things that we've learned in the last 8 weeks together into a single model. Because you have a linear pattern here, you have a lot of sweeps, you have a lot of plane creations, you have the revolve in here, you also have the revolve going on in there. So there's a lot of things that we've learned that appear a lot of times in the design of this instrument, which I think is why it's a fitting end to our CAD journey for MIT Summer 2026, the edition of How to CAD Almost Anything. Folks, I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much for sticking along all this long. We will meet again, hopefully in a couple of months, when I hope to teach again how to CAD almost anything. In the meantime, I hope you found all of these videos useful, and feel free to reach out if you ever have any questions or if you want to share your creations. Have a nice day. Bye bye.